So do you think all hell is going to break loose?
Something is definitely gonna give, and I get the sense that something's going to give in the next few months, and then all hell breaks loose. This is United States of America in recession. Everybody's getting fired across all industries, and it's happening really fast. Americans are working as much as they can, but Americans don't have enough work to make ends meet. There's a lot of unrest. It's no longer possible to gaslight the United States populace. They know something is wrong. When I hear from the head of a food bank in Tampa, Florida, that he's gone from 20,000 to 40,000 families per month, and that from the moment the doors open until the moment the doors close, from dawn to dusk, that there are people lining up to get food to feed their families, something has gone wrong. But nobody's ever gotten this information out of me, by the way. So hats off to you, buddy.
Danielle DiMartino Booth was an insider of the Federal Reserve for 9 years during the global financial crisis. This is during a time when more than 15 million Americans were unemployed and almost 4 million households lost their home due to foreclosure. Now, when Danielle left the Federal Reserve, she wrote a book about her experience titled Fed Up, an insider's take on why the Federal Reserve is bad for America. You're about to hear Danielle talk about where she believes the U.S. economy is headed as she shares with me things that she has not publicly discussed with anyone else to date. Danielle is educated, experienced, and fearless. And when she speaks, there's always insight and value to what she's saying. I hope you enjoy the show. Danielle, so great to see you again.
Likewise. I'm just happy so much has changed in real estate since we last spoke. Like, the country's like now in a state of, you don't have to convince anybody anymore. Well, I mean, except for realtors, right? Because they're always going to be in denial.
Hey, you're exactly right. And I think some of my audience too, because now that it's really starting to show up, I think a lot of the sellers are in denial. So we're, a lot to unpack today. I'm excited. But what I really like best about talking with you, Danielle, is, first, I always listen to what you have to say, because a lot of forecasters, economists, they toot their own horn about what they believe will happen with the U.S. economy. However, many don't have the insider knowledge like you do. And from working as an advisor to Richard Fisher, who was the 12th president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. That was through the GFC. So, I was there for 9 years, and if there's a hallmark of any and every real estate mania, and you can ascribe whatever driver you want. Okay, so it was a global pandemic, but it manifested as bidding wars, right? And the bidding wars got crazy. They really, really did. So again, I'm not saying that the fact that it was a global pandemic and people were moving out of city centers and flocking to where I am in Austin or Boise, Idaho, whatever was the case, when you have bidding wars go wild, you cannot have some national entity called the National Association of Realtors come in and say, well, we had all these cash sales. It's just because people are so wealthy. That doesn't work that way. Speculative manias always are backed by leverage of some kind. It's just taking us a little bit longer this time around to figure out where that leverage lies. But it's there. It's getting exposed. And we have now kind of two classes of sellers. We have the sellers who are in absolute denial. Their realtors are still lying to them. And we have sellers who are in a white hot panic mode because their financing has dried up. So they can no longer run the Ponzi schemes that allowed them to become overnight real estate moguls on TikTok. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head, because what I see is when you look at the agent that's presenting an offer to the seller, you can look back, or you can look at their offer first and see, that it's still in many cases crazy high where they don't need to be. Yeah. And, when you look back at their amount of transactions that they've done in the last year, you're lucky to find one. And so what's happening is a lot of these agents that have not produced, and they don't know that the tide is shifting, they're still from that mindset, oh, the house hits the market. If you want the house, you need to overpay for the house. And that's why we've been beating the drum that people really need to pump the brakes
and make sure that they're hiring an agent that, tells them what's really happening on the street, because it's changed. But the question is, when you and I spoke before, we talked about a lot of these things. We spoke about, how, auto loans were in default, how, mortgage forbearances, like we've never seen before. 4 years now of mortgage help and forbearance.
I mean, forbearance didn't end on the FHA level until November of 2023. I mean, we're just now seeing, people are always like, where's the recession? And I'm like, how do you have a recession when you gave away, upwards of $1.5 trillion in PPP, most of which was fraudulent, employee retention credit, most of which was fraudulent, and EIDL loans, a lot of which was fraudulent. How do you have, and nobody's getting thrown out of their homes. So rental eviction moratorium, like people are like, where was that recession that you were calling from? And I really have to push back, because mathematically I was like, impossible for us to go into recession until they pull the plug. They pulled the plug last September. It looks like recession started last October.
So do you think all hell is going to break loose?
I think that the difference between, people keep asking me what's changed, Danielle, and the difference between 2023 and 2024 is 2023 were kind of these nice, polite, white collar layoffs, 6 to 9 months of severance. If you worked at Google and made $300,000, you were getting 60% of your salary for 9 months. And it wasn't really like some kind of a financial disaster in your life, right? 2024, it's like, hey, this chain of retail stores is liquidating. They're going to close all of them. You're going to get 60 to 90 days of severance if you're lucky, right? There have been furniture manufacturers, a lot of the companies that have been affected by all the demand that was pulled forward when people bought homes. There have been companies that have just, hey, it's Thursday, don't come to work on Friday, and we're not giving you your paycheck. And they're being sued, for not providing notice of firing people. But the difference between 2023 and 2024 is speed. And everything is happening right now really fast. We've had about 100,000 layoffs announced every single month, in months that's not supposed to. January is supposed to be your big seasonal spike. We're going to fire everybody, clean house, and then we'll have a great rest of the year because we're going to, right size the business model. And then came February, March, April, May, June, July. And you're like, what is going on with these layoffs that are not stopping? And again, I think the difference is CEOs and CFOs across the spectrum. This is not just Silicon Valley got fat. This is United States of America in recession. Everybody's getting fired across all industries, and it's happening really fast. And until the shareholders are happy, the CEOs and the CFOs, they're not going to stop firing people. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the current earnings season. Hey, Salesforce just reported with more layoffs. Hey, Spotify just reported with more layoffs. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Until the shareholders are happy, that's the mantra for 2024. Until my shareholders are happy, until I've cut enough costs and fired enough people.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. They think, we look at small businesses across America. I mean, true small businesses, mom and pop shops, and they will throw their own paycheck in a drawer before, not paying their employee. They'll go down with the ship. But these publicly traded companies or large corporations, I mean, they just come in and slash jobs, close locations. It's a lot of people, they think that they're working for a bigger company and they're in a safer position until shareholders aren't happy. The earnings reports are starting to show bad data where consumers are they're flat broke, they're pulling back, they're worse than broke, they're in debt. Where do you think we are, though, in well past the midway point here in July with the state of the economy?
Well, because we know, the reason I talk about the recession being dated to October of 2023 is that we know that the economy, after revisions on a net basis, shed 192,000 jobs in the third quarter. So that was of 2023. So we know that the job losses on a net basis, right? You have to account for hiring and firing. But on a net basis, we know that net job losses began in the third quarter of 2023. So let's just take as a given that October is when net job losses began. Bloomberg Economics, thankfully, agrees with me on that timeline. We're already, on an average basis, we should be coming out of recession. Average recession post-war era, 10 months. So we should be exiting this puppy. And yet we still have not seen Jay Powell make that first rate cut. So what does that mean about the complexion, the depth, the duration of the recession? Is it going to drag it out, Danielle? The answer would be yes. I'm actually doing my first interview with you subsequent to the assassination attempt on the former president. So my views have changed slightly about when we're going to learn about the recession, which is important because that's what, stock jocks key off of Fed rate cuts. Until the Fed cuts rates, stocks go up. And then one day the Fed cuts rates, some stock jock in a trading pit somewhere says, why'd the Fed cut rates? Is something wrong with the economy? And it's the first time the question gets asked, typically speaking. And then all hell breaks loose. And so you don't usually see the stock market peak. Don't look for NVIDIA to peak or the text, whatever, until the Fed actually begins to cut rates. So what does it mean if we wait until September? I had thought when the momentum was sufficient enough to say the president has Parkinson's disease, we're going to be replacing him with somebody who does not have Parkinson's disease. The minute the assassination attempt occurred, the Democratic Party said, we're not going to spend that political capital. We're going to let Biden go down with the ship and lose the election. We're going to let Trump win. So what does that mean for the political capital that Obama retains? He appointed everybody at the National Bureau of Economic Research, which since the Truman administration dates recessions. So now that you know you're going to lose the election willingly, because you're already saying, looking to midterm elections in 2026, looking to the presidential election of 2028, how do you spend your critical political capital? Because your working assumptions have changed. You're going to save Newsom, Whitmer, whoever it is. You're going to save them for 2028. Now, do you wait if your Obama appointees at the National Bureau of Economic Research to declare that the recession has started until after Trump has won, to really stick it to the guy? Because we're all progressives, we're all liberals, we're all bureaucrats, we're all Team Obama. So let's make it as difficult a beginning of a presidency as we possibly can, and hold off on saying the recession started until Trump is in office so that we can attempt to blame him, even though any economist would be able to say that's not how this works. So we're in a different world right now. We're in a different world than we were before the event that transpired in Pennsylvania. And I think that can create a lot of noise that you wouldn't have had otherwise between now and November. I think Obama would have let the National Bureau of Economic Research announce that the recession started concomitant with Biden being replaced, and give reason to say, hey, this guy really needs to be replaced. A recession started on his watch. Here's yet another reason. If they're going to save that until after the election, you could have more calm in the data releases between now and the election than you would otherwise have, which is going to press Jay Powell to wait potentially until September or November, because the data is going to appear to be better than it is for just a few more months. Now, I realize you think that I'm a crack smoking conspiracy theorist for everything that I just said. I'm not. It's just political capital is political capital. And we live in a country that is run by several very powerful people. And when they decide the narrative is going to change, the narrative changes. And that's just that.
That makes sense. So you think that this event this past weekend sealed the deal for Trump?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, yes. He spoke in a more conciliatory tone. They're acting as if this is his moment to be the great national unifier, bring the people together, and then we can crown him Emperor Trump.
on election day. And that now, because this is a God thing now, right? Because God made his head turn right so that he didn't have his head shot off. So God wants for him to run the greatest nation in the country. So we're dealing with larger beings here. From a Democratic strategist perspective, how do you fight that?
Do you think it was wise picking J.D. Vance?
I think that if you're going to get every working man and woman in America to get on the Trump train, that you have to, and he brings Ohio. So there's something strategic to be said about a swing state in and of itself. It's going to give you Ohio. But he truly speaks to, I'm struggling to pay my bills. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm a victim of the establishment. I'm a victim of the swamp. All of these types of individuals, he speaks to. So he brings them with him. He's got an honest story of, my dad was not a real estate mogul. I was not a real estate mogul. Yeah, I'm a true story to be told. Good, bad, or in between, he's going to bring in a lot of fence sitters who want to vote for a real person.
Well, I mean, that's very interesting. I definitely had the plan to ask you about what your thought was about, this past weekend, but, and I'm glad that you brought it up. So I guess the question that I have, since we'll kind of fast forward to that, is, okay, so the scenario is Trump takes office, it all falls apart on his watch. If it weren't that story and it were, let's just flip the narrative for a second and say that Biden administration stays in, do you think that the end to the story or the lag effect still catching up, the results would have been the exact same? Or do you think that there would have been ways that this soft landing could have actually occurred? Because we've all seen, I have plenty of business owner friends. Some of them are suppliers, major suppliers. And, in the building industry, I've been in the construction and building industry for 35 years. They have really seen this roller coaster since like October. It really showed up where people just stopped spending, at least the counter sales. The contractors still had their work on the books, but now everybody is complaining about, wow, like I need work, or maybe I'm busy, but I don't have anywhere near the backlog.
This economy hit a hard wall in October from everything I'm hearing from people on the street and clients. Something happened in October where, and now we have builders who, they got a problem. They've got more completed spec homes than any time since 2010. According to Redfin, only 47% of the apartments that were delivered in the first quarter were moved into. What does that mean mathematically? That means that 53% of apartments in America that were delivered in the first 3 months of the year were not moved into. That's a problem. And there's 500,000 units in the pipeline this year, another 500,000 units in the pipeline next year. I think that on the apartment side, I think that they were hoping that this nightmare would end in 2024, but developers have pushed completing projects out further to delay the pain of, I've got an apartment building that's finished. I'm looking at the Austin skyline right now as we speak. There's a lot of emptiness out there. I'm going to slow it down. That's going to draw out the pain of this supply coming online. I think that because there are more unstarted spec homes, ground has not been broken since any time in the history of the National Association of Home Builders. In history, I think you're going to see single family. I think you're going to see home builders try and not build those homes. Some way, somehow. Somebody's got to get a control of the oversupply situation in the residential real estate market. Somehow, some way. Because when you add up what Airbnb jocks are dumping, when you add up what mid-size investors, we're talking about, I own but somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 homes. When you add up what they're dumping, when you see where I live in Dallas, Texas, the biblical build in inventory, it's the home builders are going to have to find a way of pushing back against all of the supply coming online. Buyer traffic fell to 27 in a report that came out just before we started to film. That's a problem. When you have data prints that are as bad as they were in 2006, 2007. So I think somebody in power in residential real estate, while Joe Q buyer is being convinced by Jane Q realtor, you can get $600,000 for this. There are builders out there who are in white hot panic mode trying to figure out how to pull back on some of the supply, because you've got a third of all homes now in the pool of inventory that are new, plus these apartments.
And you talk about that back in 2005. That's when I was building houses back then, and that's when we started seeing it. Well before the existing home sales started crashing, and we were so much more affordable back then than we are today. I mean, we've now increased, the size of the footprint of the home, so more square footage. The cost for these builders has gone up exponentially. I mean, just the amount of time it takes and the red tape that they have to go through at the highest cost in history. So you think these national home builders are in trouble?
I don't think the national home builders ever envisioned getting to September of 2024 with the 30-year fixed rate mortgage where it is when they started buying down mortgages in the summer of 2022. I don't think that they ever thought that they'd be playing this game for more than 2 years. Not in a million years.
Let's play this clip. You've probably heard it, but I want to get your reaction to it.
I would just start by saying that the U.S. economy has performed really remarkably well over the last couple of years. 2023, last year, was a year in which the economy grew well above 3%. The labor market remained very strong. Unemployment remained very low, and inflation came down at quite a sharp pace, particularly in the second half of the year, by a very large amount. And that forecast was almost unheard of. It was unheard of before 2023. So big upside surprise that year. This year, we had expected the economy to slow a bit gradually, the labor market to continue to gradually cool off after being overheated a couple of years ago, and inflation to continue to make progress. And something like that is basically what has happened. The economy is growing now at about 1.5% in the first half of the year. Most forecasters have about a 2% growth rate for the full year. The labor market, again, has moved into better and better balance to the point where I think you can now say it's essentially no tighter than it was in 2019 before the pandemic. Remember that the labor market of 2019 was a very strong labor market. So we're back to that place, no longer overheated. On inflation, in the first quarter, we didn't make any more progress. The second quarter, actually, we did make some more progress. We've had now 3 better readings. And if you average them, that's a pretty good pace.
So tell me what's going on here. I mean, based on our conversation and what Powell is saying, I mean, I've asked you before if he's delusional. You say no, he's very intelligent, but and also they say that he's not politically influenced. So, I mean, what are they thinking? And by the way, and I'd drop your book in the link below. I've read it. After you worked for the Federal Reserve, you wrote a book about how we don't need the Federal Reserve or to get rid of the Federal Reserve.
And the Fed. I always wanted to re-engineer it.
Re-engineer it, right. But the way that they're doing things now, right.
People instead of serves Wall Street. That's a quick synopsis. This is an answer that would take me a very long time to answer. Jay Powell can spout off. And he's actually said, he knows that the jobs data is overstated. I mean, he used that very diplomatic word. But until the actual revisions have been made, so the third quarter of 2023 revisions that were made, that was a swing factor of 800,000 jobs that went missing, backing the income that was not created by the jobs that did not exist out of the GDP figures and backing the consumption that did not exist out of the GDP figures because people if they didn't have jobs, they weren't making money. This all takes quarters and quarters and quarters and quarters and years and years and years and years to manifest in the data. So Jay Powell can sit on whatever laurels he wants right now about the first reported prints of certain economic data. And God bless him for doing so, because I think he's answering a higher call. And that is, in a nutshell, we do not have enough time to get into it. The non-banking financial system globally is $240 trillion. The conventional banking system globally is $180 trillion. One is regulated, one is not. So if he can, in his career, what's left of it through May of 2026 at the Federal Reserve, if he can press forward with regulations that will finally begin to regulate the non-banks, then he should say that the economy, that the consumer, that the job market, that all of it is stronger than what it needs to be. The only way to smoke out these kingpins of private equity is to say the economy is strong, and therefore keep interest rates higher than they otherwise would be. And we see this in REITs throwing up gates and preventing redemptions, and buildings trading for 23 cents on the dollar. All of these things are because interest rates have been higher for longer than anybody in the non-banking sector than their worst nightmare would have dictated. It's the only way to smoke them out and to press through with something called Basel III Endgame, a new set of regulations that will begin to rein in these cowboys of finance who live outside of the purview of regulators and make their own rules.
One of the, I think, reasons I've always said that we haven't seen a housing market crash so far, and I hear you with the jobs reports, and I mean, I think, if we look back in the history, right before a major recession, the government always creates these full-time jobs. And, and they're doing so, I believe, and so that the numbers don't look,
of course,
they're manipulating that data, right? Of the real report. Now, I'm not saying that the government jobs aren't real, but that's, certainly increasing.
They're convenient.
Yes.
Just yesterday, we got news that 50% of the states are going to be slashing their spending, because relative to the money that was pouring into state coffers when the U.S. taxpayer was feeling very generous to everybody, now you've got 50% of the states saying, whoa, our budget just took a body blow and we're going to be slashing spending. So the days of government job creation, conveniently enough, with Trump winning office, are going to end at the same time.
Will that result in just eliminating open jobs, or do you think that it will result in government layoffs?
Well, we will see, because again, go back to the shareholders who have to be satisfied, and therefore the jobs that have to be cut. And the fact that, people will not sell their homes. They've got the golden handcuffs of really low mortgage rates unless there's a death, divorce, tax, and or loss of job. So once we see that begin to percolate through the economy, I think you stop having these polite chit chats about how things end up. And again, the unemployment rate has been politely increasing by 0.1 of a percentage point to 4.1% since it troughed at 3.4%. When economies turn, there's no more politeness about it. You see 0.3 of a percentage point, 0.4 of a percentage point increases in the unemployment rate. You don't have to kind of smooth the narrative. Everybody figures it out pretty quickly. And that's why we have seen in the University of Michigan consumer sentiment data the steepest decline in the history of data back to 1968 of people's perceptions of their income declining in the history of the University of Michigan. People know that their paychecks are shrinking, and or that their wife or husband is going to lose a job, and or that their neighbor has. People are aware that it's no longer possible to gaslight the United States populace. They know something is wrong. And by the way, most of them aren't going to go out and vote on election day because they don't feel connected to either candidate. So it's just going to be one of these things where there's a lot of disgruntledness. There's a lot of unsettledness in our society.
When you're seeing the mortgage payments that these young buyers are committing themselves to based on two incomes, it is downright scary. I have buyers that have called me, in tears, basically talking about how they can no longer afford their mortgage and they need to sell their house, and they bought it 2 years ago. And I mean, we're seeing that. I'm selling their houses,
Well,
and
they want to know who the evil person is who invented a property tax.
100% in insurance.
Even more evil person is who invented a homeowner's insurance policy that in the great state of Texas is just doubled in cost. They're like, who is this person? I was just going to cover the mortgage payment. That's how much I could afford.
Exactly. Let's take a look at this. This is a United States full-time employment chart here on tradingeconomics.com.
Yep.
And what I want, what you said, and you spelled this out just shortly ago, how different the full-time employment is in 24 versus 23. And you can see basically, once we hit November, it really, took a nosedive, and that is really supportive to that October data that you're referring to. And what I really want to look at, Danielle, here is the average hourly earnings month over month.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, that has dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And, we look at that first line item there. And then really the average weekly hours stayed the same at 34.3.
Now you're getting to the meat on the bone. You're actually
seeing
the length of the work week. The bottom line is we've lost more than 1.5 million full-time jobs. We have a record number of Americans working full-time jobs and part-time gigs. Okay. I can't tell you how many Ubers I've been in for the first time. Ubers I've been in where it's a first-time driver. Americans are working. Americans are working as much as they can, but Americans don't have enough work to make ends meet. And it is a tragedy that we're losing so many full-time positions and that so many people are scraping by.
Right. And this data that they're pushing out here, I mean, I call a full-time work week 40 hours in the state of Maryland. I don't know about, So, at least, so when we're looking at, they're considering this full-time data when it's almost an entire day less than what we should be looking at for full-time employment. And here's another thing I want to look at, Danielle, is that the employment cost index. Now, so what I want to focus here on, and back in 2017, I went to a conference in Tennessee. I've been in commercial real estate, and this conference was called Internet of Things. It was BOMA, Building Owners and Managers Association, and we were already coming out of the GFC, where employers were looking at every way possible to cut costs, and salaries are the highest cost in a lot of cases for employers. It's expensive, especially
line item is your labor cost, and
especially with all the covering health care and time off. And I'm not saying employees aren't worth that, but getting back to what you were saying about how these, corporations are more concerned about their shareholders than they are the employees. But here's what I really want to show here, because this is really crazy. If we look at the cost now of civilian workers, we haven't seen this high of a cost to employers since Q1 of 2003. And, when we look at that little, peak that was happening somewhere around 21, 22, the only reason that skyrocketed as a cost for employers to have employees is because of all the money printing they did, all of the COVID stimulus. And it was a boom. It was a pandemic boom. And these employers were giving sign-on bonuses and stay here bonuses because they were being recruited. But now that party's over.
Yep. There's no more quiet quitting going on. There's no more entitled millennials who are insisting that if they're going to go into the office, it's just one day a week, and otherwise they need to have yoga provided everywhere else. No, it's those days are over.
And look at the data here, really from Q1 to 2009, almost until up to the pandemic in 2019. Look how low the cost to have employees went dropped on their, on these these businesses' income statements. They really historically, that way we know employees aren't making money. They're not thriving. They can't support this ridiculous, cost of living increase. And that's why I agree with you. I think something's going to give.
Something is definitely going to give. And I get the sense that something's going to give in the next few months. I love metaphors, of course, and it is a blazing hot summer across the country. And I don't find any coincidence in that. I always look for metaphors in life. And I think that there are a lot of U.S. households, a lot of U.S. families, a lot of individuals, a lot of people who are angry and bitter that they've put off starting families because they can't afford them and they can't afford the housing. There's a lot of unrest, and unrest in the end, everything boils down to money. Not being cynical, it's just when I hear from the head of a food bank in Tampa, Florida, that he's gone from 20,000 to 40,000 families per month. And that from the moment the doors open until the moment the doors close, from dawn to dusk, that there are people lining up to get food to feed their families. Something has gone wrong. But again, we have quiet bread lines. We have food stamp programs. We have people in stores with us who are using these programs, but it's invisible because we have debit cards and we have a polite way to gloss over poverty in this country, but it's with us.
So do you think that we're going to see higher poverty?
I think that the University of Michigan, again, this is a data set that's been around originally since 1948. I think that when they say that people's perceptions of whether inflation will be able to keep up with their income in 5 years' time is at a record low only on average, for them to specify that that's an average. So the average, it's always been reported as an average, is at the lowest on records. And for them to clarify and say, understand that the top third of income earners are pulling this number up, and that therefore the lowest income earners are suffering even more than what our data reveal. I think that that's telling that the provider of data that is typically considered to be a liberal source of data is allowing such messaging to come out in the middle of a presidential election cycle. I don't think that we're hearing Americans right now. I think that the wealth effect and the K-shaped economy and the gaudy wealth of everybody in Palm Beach, et cetera, I think that, and TikTok making everybody think that they can all be an influencer and all be wealthy. I think people focus on that and they don't focus on the rest of America. And that's where the focus needs to be. And I said it on my Twitter feed a few nights ago. I said, it is a weekend. I am sending out a weekend tweet. This is the time for you to step up and be charitable. And if you have the means, double your charitable giving and double it now.
What kind of threat do you think that AI has to humanity? I mean, before you answer that, I want to, I have several friends of mine that are they're in ad agencies. They're, creative workers. And they're really petrified because there's a new Volvo commercial. Have you seen it?
No.
The one so this Volvo commercial, is 100% AI generated. And they did this commercial in less than 24 hours. Now, I can't tell you how much. I mean, I was talking with my friend yesterday, and he was saying that this one 30-second ad spot that they were working on for, a TV ad was almost $100,000 for a 30-second ad is what the revenue, created from an ad. Creating this with AI. I mean, I can't tell you how many jobs will this take?
Well, I like to try and be as measured as possible about talking about AI. AI is going to affect the U.S. economy specifically in 2 chapters. The first chapter is going to be like a horror story, replacing God knows how many employees, right? If you're AI, you can be a paralegal. If you're AI, you can be an accountant.
even though apparently AI has trouble with numbers. But there are many professions that can be replaced by AI, right? Especially on the creative side. And so the beginning of this, in that 84% of large U.S. employers, according to the Richmond Fed Duke University CFO survey, 84% of large employers are replacing warm bodies with AI. 47% of small companies are going that route. It's not an easy thing to do for a smaller company because AI costs money in order to even just tap, exploit, etc. But the trend is in place. The cost-cutting mode is in place. The recognition of recession is going to give other CFOs and CEOs more cover to replace human bodies with AI. That's chapter 1. It's ugly. And you had all this quiet quitting. I don't need to work in the office. On top of that, you've got offshoring of high-paying white-collar jobs, right? Stanley Decker, they offshored like 1,000 finance jobs from Connecticut to Mumbai. It's very common. And that was something that was brought on themselves by a lot of snarky little young people who didn't want to go back to the office. And they're like, I can work from anywhere. And, the light bulb goes off over the head and they're like, anywhere. I can pay a third of that person's salary. She can work anywhere if she wants in Mumbai. So there went that plus AI. I have to end on a happy, positive note. However, public education in the United States of America is in a shambles. It's a complete disaster. When you think about what's missing in U.S. classrooms, what's cut the ladder off for your average public school kid who doesn't live in the right zip code with the right high school, replacing teachers union people who were just determined to satisfy their own agenda. We're going to keep the schools closed for a few years because of a pandemic. State of Texas opened them up. School was moved from the cafeteria to the gym. They distanced. My twins didn't miss a beat, education-wise. They found a way because humans innovate. You can replace all of these entitled teachers, a lot of these entitled teachers. Using AI, we can make education in America great again. We can. So there are going to be massive benefits for the future of AI and what it can do for education. And education, after all, is the very foundation of every economy, right? Right. So I think that the second chapter of AI is going to be much lovelier.
Do you think, and I only bring this up because I just had this conversation with someone who believes that AI is like the enemy, that it was created to destroy the internet and destroy history and knowledge as we know it. Do you think about that at all? I mean, do you think where we already know that it's can be giving incorrect data? Do you think that we'll be looking, when you're talking about education, do you think we'll be better off having an old set of encyclopedias than the new AI at all?
No, I don't. I think that AI is going to be generative. I think that AI is going to be corrected. I think the fact that AI is not perfect is good news, right? Yeah, hey,
Okay.
there's collision for human beings. Whoa, yay. I mean,
For now.
I could theoretically plug, 20 years of writing style into AI, and it will start to spit out something that sounds like Danielle wrote this. But coming up with the quirky, weird ideas that I come up with on a daily basis, that are the basis of the research at QI, that comes from the strange place in a strange mind. And I don't think that that can be replicated. I think that certain things are going to stay in the human realm. And I do think that AI can be improved upon. And, as long as you don't have crazy people running countries who want to use AI to its disadvantage. And then you always go back generations, whoever invented the atom bomb, whoever invented the like button on Facebook, I never meant for it to hurt people. So I think it comes down to good people controlling the bad prospects for AI.
Yeah. I want to ask you, there's a lot of people that say that you would be good in office and serving the public. I do want to talk about your business, QI, and what you've been up to lately. But have you ever thought about taking an office, and number one and number two, to sort of piggyback to that, If you were in charge of our economy, I mean, living through the greatest financial crisis, the global financial crisis of the 2008 era, in your position where you sat in the room with people that were very smart people that got so many things wrong and made so many mistakes, if you were in a position to where you could make these changes, and I know this is an action-packed question, but what would you do differently with the economy?
So, to answer your sort of question, I've certainly been approached and pondered after my children are out of high school, potentially running for public office. Very few who have served the country have adhered to their own term limits, but the ones who have done extraordinary work for the United States of America, knowing that they're going to leave and that therefore they can be brave in their positions. I think that the economy as it's been constructed is for the benefit of the wealthiest. That's something that I learned when I was on the inside at the Federal Reserve. I think that monetary policy cannot be thrown out the window, given our sovereign enemies have shown us exactly what they will do with our information if left unguarded. God knows what they would do to our financial system. But I do think that monetary policy, that public policy, that fiscal policy should all be created in the interests of education in America, of making sure that everybody has a future in this country, raising up all. It's very easy to understand, if you can get past the lobbyists and the special interest groups, how policy has been made to benefit the wealthy. So therefore, it's not brain surgery, brain science. It's not difficult to tear the policies down that have benefited the wealthiest and bring policies together that will benefit everybody in the United States of America. It's not a difficult task. It just has to be done, and you thereby have to get past the lobbyists and all of the billionaires' money.
How much so do you think that part of that initiative would be, building up small business, encouraging more entrepreneurs?
Of course. The United States of America was not created so that Google could buy everybody, so that Amazon could say, oh, look, there's innovation in my industry. I'll just put a high price tag on it and buy it. We have trust laws for a reason. We are not a nation of oligopolies. We should not be a nation of oligopolies. We should not put our community banks out of business and become China with 4 or 5 large banks either. We are a different nation for a very good reason. And entrepreneurship, innovation, starting small businesses is not something that should be destroyed by the largest companies in the world, simply inhaling any competition that they see in their midst. In my opinion, well, I don't really have any humble opinions. That's BS.
So how do you see going head to head with this, big industry, this Wall Street?
Look, you asked me what I would do if I was the Queen of Sheba. I didn't say it was going to be easy, but I do think that term limits are something that would be a very good starting point, because then the people who are serving their constituents know that they can honestly serve them because they're leaving. When you think of everything that one individual, Pat Toomey, did in terms of not further corrupting the institution known as the Federal Reserve Bank of America, what did he adhere to? His own self-imposed term limits. I'm going to serve my country, and then I'm going to leave so that I can serve in an honest fashion and not worry about satisfying a lobbyist or a special interest group who's going to be funding my next campaign. Get in, get the hell out, and serve your country right.
Danielle, that's well said. I think we're going to hear more from you. And this is all great information. I appreciate your commitment to education.
Blocking this information out of me, by the way. So
really? Well,
I'm preparing you for this to go viral. Maybe it's because the state's capital is in my view, but nobody's ever interviewed me about this stuff. So hats off to you, buddy.
Well, thank you. So let's kind of talk about what you've been doing now. I want to talk about QI research and kind of what your business does, and because you stay well entrenched in this data. And so tell everybody, what do you do on a daily basis?
So every day we produce the Daily Feather, every single day. 4 rich charts that have nothing to do with anything the sell side would ever produce. $59 a month, just like my book Fed Up. I make sure that what goes on in this
crazy, quirky mind of mine is accessible to anybody and everybody who wants to continue down their journey of financial literacy. I have my institutional clients from Singapore to South Africa to all around the world, hedge funds. I have a live Bloomberg chat room. We get deep down and dirty with all of the economic data. I have positionings and feelings about where we should be on the yield curve, how I feel the stock market is valued. That's a whole different echelon of clients. Those are our QI pros, as we call them. We produce 8 times a week for them. I have a serious passion for this company, which is why the other question I'm asked the most often is, why won't you write a sequel to Fed Up? Only because I only sleep like 3 hours a night, keeping this business up and running. It is my passion. I do believe in financial literacy, and I do enjoy working, as I started on Wall Street, with a lot of the great people who are still in this industry and not trying to corrupt for their own greed and good.
Well, I commend you for everything, and especially your courage. And I think that we need to hear more voices like you, and especially I love your passion. So thanks so much, Danielle, and I look forward to us getting together again soon.
Well, thank you for your time today and all of your insightful questions.
Talk to you soon. All right, guys, thanks for making it to the end. We'd love to know your comments. Drop them below. And if you haven't already subscribed to Sachs Realty's YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Please consider doing so now. Hit that alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content like this. Now, if you like the video, you can let Danielle and I both know by smashing that thumbs up. That also helps the algorithm share the video with more people. And one of the biggest compliments that you can give me personally here at Sachs Realty for being your host of our Sachs Realty show is to share this video and our channel with your family and friends. I ask you to help us build the biggest community on the internet where you hear facts about real estate, financial news, and geopolitical issues facing the country. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.